Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a little bit of a deeper dive into how walls work inside of Revit. So I'm just going to start out by creating a new project file. Alright, so if you remember from last week, what we did was we drew a series of walls on top of an AutoCAD drawing that we brought into Revit by using our wall tool up here. Alright, so all we did was we clicked on our wall tool, and then we clicked once to select the first point of our wall, and then we clicked again to select the second point of our wall, and then we could just keep drawing as many wall segments as we wanted to. Alright, so if you remember from last week, after we create our walls, I showed you that if you select a wall and you go over here to your properties panel, you can see different settings that are associated with that specific wall type. Alright, so if I were to click on this section of the properties panel right here, I would get a list of all the current wall types inside of my project file. And if you remember, I explained that whenever we're working on projects, there are going to be several different types of walls that we're going to have to use depending on what the project requires, okay? So there's no one standard wall type. It's all going to be specific to the project, and there are different code requirements that you need based on, what you're trying to do with your design, okay? So for example, we have exterior wall types, and then we have generic wall types, and then we have interior wall types, and these are all going to be represented in Revit a little bit differently. They all have different attributes associated with them. For example, you can see these interior ones are thinner, okay? So we have interior walls ranging from 3 1/8 all the way up to 6 1/8 inches in thickness. But if we go and we look at an exterior wall, it doesn't list the thickness, but you can see from the thumbnail that it's visually going to be a lot thicker, okay, because it has a lot more layers associated with it. If we look at our generic wall types that we have in here, these are basically just placeholder walls, okay, and that's what we have by default when you start placing walls inside of Revit. This is what we used for the assignment last week on the exterior portion of the walls. But basically these walls, like I said, they are placeholders and they don't have any layer information built into them, okay? By layer information, I'm talking about what kind of stud is inside of the wall, what kind of sheathing does the wall use, is there a sheathing on the exterior, does it have gypsum, is it a gypsum wallboard, okay, so like drywall. Does it have layers of drywall? And if so, how thick are those layers? Are they a 1/2 inch thick? Are they 5/8 of an inch thick? All of that stuff, that's all important, and we can build that level of detail into our Revit model. That's sort of the whole meaning behind BIM. Okay, if you remember back to, I think the start of the class, I touched on how Revit is a BIM application. So BIM stands for Building Information Modeling, and what that means is basically our project file contains, or our model, it contains all the information about the project inside it directly, okay? So any object that we click on, we'll be able to get all the details of the exact makeup of that object, whether it be a wall or a floor or a ceiling. We can click on it and it has all of that information built into it, okay? So that's sort of the whole idea. We're not trying to make something that has a simple representation like in AutoCAD where it's just a few lines, and then we go into our documents and we manually specify what the exact makeup of that wall is, do that all by hand. Instead, we're building that information directly into our objects, whether it be walls, floors, or ceilings, or really any other object that we're using inside of Revit. We're building as much of that information into it as possible, so that way down the road when we have to go in and specify that information in our document sets, it can just be pulled automatically. Okay, Revit is intelligent, and you'll be able to just pull that information and tell Revit what kind of information you want. Okay, what do I want in my door schedule? What do I want in my on my wall type sheet? Okay, what kind of information do I need? You'll be able to pull that information because it's already built into all the objects in here, all right? So I'm going to elaborate a little bit further on that. But if you look, we have a set of basic walls, okay, so exterior, interior, everything you would like typically think of. And then we have other types of walls. So we have curtain walls. These are essentially like exterior glazing systems. So if you think of like a storefront where it's just a series of glass panels, that's what a curtain wall is. And then down here we have a stacked wall. And a stacked wall is something that you define on your own. But basically that's like if I had like a really thick brick wall on the bottom and then I added like a thinner, wall type on top of that, it's basically taking two different types of walls and stacking them on top of each other at different heights, all right? You're not going to use that one too much, but just be familiar with what it is. Mainly you'll be using the basic wall types, and then you'll also be using the curtain walls a little bit as well. All right, but you can see that we have a series of walls that come by default already built into Revit that we can use, okay? These come with the architectural template that we selected at the very beginning when we decided to make a new project, okay? If you were to select a different type of template, it would have different types of walls built into it, and it's all based on what you're going to be doing inside of your project, okay? But there's inevitably going to be a time where you're going to have to go in here and you're going to have to specify something custom, okay? This isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. These are a good starting point, but there's always going to be, especially in actual practice, times where you go in and you define your own custom wall types, okay? And you assign your own attributes to these wall types. So for example, let's say right now you can see I have this one that says generic 8 inches. Okay, if I were to zoom in on this and look at it, like I said, there's no information in terms of layers here. Basically, this is just like we had in AutoCAD. It's just two lines, and the thickness of it is present, but we don't really get much information about the actual makeup of the wall, okay? And if we were to up the detail level of this, you can see that when I even go to a fine level of detail, nothing about the appearance of this wall changes. If I were to go back here and draw a exterior wall, so I have this one exterior brick CMU on metal stud. If I were to draw that and take a look at it, if I were to switch this to a coarse level of detail, you can see that it looks pretty basic like the other one. If I zoom in, you can see that there is a layer here, okay? There's some sort of extra layer going on. And if I turn this to now a fine level of detail, you can see all of the individual layers that are making up the composition of that wall type, okay? And you'll be able to understand this a little bit better even if I switch my visual style right here to be something like shaded. Okay, now you can actually see colors that represent the individual materials that are making up the structure of this wall, okay? And comparing that to our generic wall type, again, there's nothing going on here. It's literally just basic geometry that's representing the wall, but you don't know what this wall is made out of, okay? So generic walls are what you want to use early on in a project when you have an idea of like wall thickness and stuff like that. But then as you go in later on, you'd want to go and swap these out for real walls, okay? So how do I do that? You can simply select a wall, and then you can go in here and toggle to a different wall type, and you'll see the wall automatically updates, okay? So here's a more specific wall, interior 6 1/8 inch, okay? And you can see that this one now has more detail to it, okay? So here's my stud layer, and then it looks like I have 2 layers of gypsum wallboard on either side of my stud, okay? Now I'm going to show you how we go in and we set up custom wall types so that it makes a little bit more sense. But first I want to toggle over to a diagram that I have here, because I think that is going to help you out a little bit in case you're a little bit confused by what I mean by wall layers, okay? So here is a typical, like commercial exterior wall. Okay, this is a cutaway of it, so you can see all the layers that go into the composition of this wall. So on the outside here, we have just a common brick. Okay, this is our exterior side of the wall. So here's our exterior brick that you'd see on the outside of the building. And then right here we have an airspace layer. Okay, so between this blue part here and the brick, this is a layer of airspace, and that is going to have a specific thickness associated with it based on code requirements. This blue layer right here, that is going to be a rigid foam insulation. All right, and then beyond that right here, this is layers of CMU, so concrete masonry units. If you think about like cinder block, that's essentially what this is right here. Okay, it's just cement block. And then beyond that, if you look right here at this section, let me zoom in a little bit. This little part right here, this is actually a metal stud, okay? Or actually it's a hat channel, that's what that's known as, but on the other side of that hat channel is our layer of drywall, okay? So right here is a gypsum wallboard, okay? And all these layers go together, and this is what makes up the composition of the wall. So when we're looking at this in Revit, basically what we are seeing is a top-down view of this portion right here, essentially. So we're seeing our layer of brick, and then we're seeing maybe an airspace, so our little gap right here. Then we're seeing our rigid foam insulation, then our CMU, and then our like hat channel or metal stud, whatever's in there, and then the layer of gypsum that's on the inside right there. Okay, so if I were to toggle back to Revit, you can see that's essentially the same sort of situation that's going on here. All right. Now, let me show you how we go in and we actually edit a wall and make our own custom version, okay? So let's say I want to edit this generic wall and make it something, custom. What you'd want to do is click here. You want to select your wall, and then you go here to edit type. Okay. So this edit type menu is how we define new versions of different objects inside of Revit. Okay. This type menu exists for any object that is inside of your file, whether it be a chair, whether it be a light fixture, whether it be a wall or a floor or a ceiling. Anything like that is going to have this type menu that you can open up, and you can define a new version of that object, okay? So if we're inside this type properties menu right here, we can see right now the family we are dealing with is a basic wall family. All right, the type that we're dealing with is generic 8-inch, and that's the same thing that we're seeing here. If I were to toggle that, you can see these are the exact same list of options that I have inside of my menu over here when I click and expand that. Okay, exact same thing. You can switch between them and you can modify the ones that you want. Looking through here, you can see a bunch of different information about the wall itself. So this is the intelligent information that I'm talking about with a BIM file. Okay, so a building information modeling file. We're adding all of this information in here. We're coming into the menus and we're changing our options. So you don't have to know what all this means right now, but we're defining all these things about the wall, about what the actual wall would be in real life. So that way later on, our job is a lot easier because we don't have to manually type all that information out. It's intelligently stored and it can always be referenced, okay, whenever we go to put this in our document sets. All right. So let's say I wanted to change and make my own custom version now. What you could do is click here on this duplicate option, and now it's going to ask me to name my duplicate. So let's say I want to make a, let's do a 10-inch wall gypsum wallboard. Okay, this is not really a realistic wall, but I'm just going to show you just a very basic example. So let's say I want my wall to be 10 inches and it's going to have gypsum wallboard on either side of the wall, okay? So then I can click OK. And then what you would want to do, you can see now that's appearing in my menu of options here. What you'd want to do is go in here and modify the structure, okay? So if I click here on structure, I click on edit. Here you can see I'm taken to a new menu, okay? And this is going to be a little bit confusing. This is just how Revit is. It's not very visual, it's menu system. So you kind of have to get a good understanding of what's going on beforehand. What you want to do, the first thing to make it easier on yourself, is go down here to this preview button, click on that, and you're going to get a preview of what that wall assembly looks like, okay? So right now what I am seeing here in this preview is essentially what you're seeing right here, okay? So here's my 8-inch wall, and I renamed my wall to be 10 inches, but you can see that its thickness is still set to be 8 inches, okay? So that hasn't changed at all. Nothing about the wall has changed other than the name I have given it. All right, so right here in this portion of the window is where we go in and we specify our layers, okay? The layers that are inside of the wall. Right now you can see there's this layer in the middle that says structure, and it has the thickness of 8 inches. And then above and below it, it says there's a core boundary, okay? But that has a thickness of 0 inches. So essentially, there's only one layer in here. The only layer that has thickness is the structural one right here. Here, if you look, we have an exterior side and an interior side, okay? So you can think of this side of the wall as your interior and this side of the wall as your exterior. And then this portion here, this gray you're seeing, is right here in the middle, and that is your structure section right here. So now let's say I want to modify the thickness of it. So let's say I want my structure layer to be 9 inches, and then I'm going to put a 1/2 inch gypsum wallboard on either side of that to get my 10 inches that I want, okay? So I could set this to be 9 inches. When I do that, you can see it gets a little bit thicker, and now my total thickness is set to 9 inches. All right, next what I'd want to do is insert my layers for my gypsum wallboard or my drywall, and I'm going to have one layer on each side of this wall. All right, so I'm going to click on my insert, and you can see it's added a new layer here above my structure layer, okay? So it's going to add a new layer on top of my on my exterior side. Okay, so that new layer is going to go right here because you can see it's closer to the exterior side text right here, and it's above the structure layer, okay? Now what you want to do is switch this to be some kind of a different layer. So I'm going to click on finish for this one. So I'm going to have my finish as my gypsum wallboard. And then you want to assign your thickness to it. So this one is going to be 1/2 inch because I need 1 inch to get me to my total thickness of 10 inches. So it's going to be 0.5 inches. When I do that, you can see it has added 1/2 inch thick layer right here on top of that. All right. And then I need to add another layer below this, okay? So I'm going to just add a new layer, and I'm going to show you how we put the layer in the correct spot. So what I could do is I can click on Insert to make a new layer, and then I'm going to give this a finish as well. And then I'm going to give this the same thickness as the layer below it. So we're going to assign 1/2 inch to that. But you can see when I do that, obviously, since it was above my other layer, okay, so I have 9 inches right here, and then I have 1/2 inch right here. Then I have another 1/2 inch right here, okay? It's on the wrong spot, it's on the wrong side. I want to have this on this side, on the interior side. So in that case, to move it, what you need to do is click on that layer so that it turns black. Then you click on this down button. Okay, you can see the up and down buttons shift the position of the layer inside of your layer stack, okay? And you basically want this to be all the way at the bottom so that structure is sandwiched between the finished layer here and the finish layer here, okay? So now we have our 9-inch structure, and on either side of it, we have our gypsum wallboard. All right, if you want to see this represented in a little bit different of a way, what you could do is go down here to your view section, and then right now it's set to like a top-down floor plan sample of the wall, but you could click on section and you could see what it looks like if you were to cut through it vertically as a vertical section, okay? And you can zoom in and out. But you can see if I were looking at this in a section cut, here are my 2 layers now. Well, my 3 layers, my structure in the middle, and then my drywall on the outside and my drywall on the inside. All right. What you'd want to do after that is actually go in here and assign materials, but I'm not going to get into that in this lesson. I just want to focus in this lesson on how we start defining the makeup of a wall, okay, and how we start adding some extra detail to it, okay? So here we just learned how to start assigning those extra layers to just a generic wall type. All right, so once you're done with that, once you have the wall composition, how you like it, all you have to do is click OK. And now we have our wall how we want it. And all we have to do is click OK now. And you can see that I had that wall selected right here, and my new wall type is showing just how I had it in that menu. And if I wanted to measure this to confirm the thickness, I can just click on it and drag, and you can see from outside face to outside face, it has a thickness of 10 inches just as I wanted, okay? And then if I were to go back to my wall section, so click on my wall tool, click on my drop down, you can see if I scroll down here, right here at the top, 10-inch wall gypsum wallboard is appearing inside of my menu, and I can click it and I can drag and I can draw as many of those as I want. All right. All right, so that's how we go in and define custom wall types and understand sort of how this type selection menu works over here. The next thing I'm going to do is go a little bit into what your options with walls inside of Revit are when it comes to these settings over here. All right, so I'm going to switch over to a 3D view for this, just so it's a little bit easier to understand. All right, so here's my 3D view. Right now I have the default, what's called the hidden line view on, so it just looks like white faces with black edges. If you want to change that to make it a little bit easier to see, just click on the button right here at the bottom to change your graphic display options and set it to shaded, okay? Now to orbit, we hold the shift key and use the middle mouse button, and we can orbit around and we can see what these walls look like in 3D. Okay, so if you look at the basic exterior wall that I put in here, you can see there's a lot of things that are built into this. So you can see it has the brick facade, it has the CMU here at the bottom. You can see all kinds of details about it. So there's all kinds of stuff that's going into the composition of an actual wall compared to just the generic walls that we've been using up until now, okay? So that's why you'd want to go in and actually change how these are appearing. Okay, so next, what I want to talk about, modifying different characteristics of our walls, okay? So if I were to look at this and I were to select one of my walls here, you can see I have what's known as an unconnected height, okay? What does unconnected mean? That means that is not associated with a level. Okay, so levels were discussed a little bit in the LinkedIn learning videos, but levels are basically levels of your building. So if you think of like, you know, just any building, you have first floor, second floor, third floor, and so on. Those are the levels that are associated with your building, okay? Inside of Revit, we can define levels and we can tie our walls to those levels so that if those levels change, the walls will change with them. So if I zoom out here a little bit, what you're seeing right here are levels, okay? These little indicators right here with the little level tag. we're seeing that our project right now has two levels built into it. We have level 0 or level 1, which is at 0. It has a 0 height. And then above that is level 2, and that has a height of 10 feet. Okay? If I were to go here using my view cube to toggle to a front view, you can see when I look at the height of my walls in relationship to these levels, they're a lot higher. Okay, so my level here is my level 2 is at 10 feet 0 inches. My wall is set to 20 feet 0 inches, and like I said, it has an unconnected height because it's not the top of this wall is not associated with either one of these levels. All right, so that gives me the freedom. If I were to click on that and change this unconnected height, I could set that to be anything I want. So if I were to say like 30 feet and hit enter and click apply, you can see my wall now extends upward, and now that is 30 feet tall. Okay, now let's say I wanted to associate it with one of these levels that I have here. What I can do is I can click on that wall again. I can go to my top constraint right here, and I can select one of my two levels. So what I want to do now is click up to level 2, click apply. You can see now that it's snapped my wall down right at the same height as this level 2. Okay? So, like I said, the reason you want to tie your wall heights to these levels is because once they're tied to these levels, what you can do is change the height of the levels and the walls will move with them. Okay? So if I were to change this now, let's say I set my level height to be 12 feet. You can see as that bumps up, the actual wall itself goes with it. All right. Let's say I want to tie the rest of these walls to that same level as well. All I have to do is click on all these walls. So click that one and then hold control to click my other two. And when they're all selected, go over here in the menu, switch my top constraint to be up to level 2, and then click apply. Okay. So going back to my front view now, you can see my levels are correctly tied to my wall right here. And if I go in and change that level height again to be like, let's say 20 feet, hit enter, the level moves up and the walls go with it. Okay. The only time you would not want to tie a wall to a level is if it were like something custom and, you know, for example, if we're like an outlier, say all of your other walls are consistent height, but you have one that's shorter for some reason, you could set that one to be unconnected. So switch that to unconnected and then set its height to whatever you want. So if it were like just a short wall, like 5 feet, click apply, and now that one is independent of these other ones. And regardless of where you move this level, the other wall will stay where you have placed it. Okay? All right, so that's a good example of your wall heights and how you associate them with levels. If you want to create more levels inside of your file, there are a few ways of doing it. What you can do is you can go into a view like this, a 3D view. Okay, so I went to my default 3D view to get here. And you can click on one of these and you can use the copy tool right here. And you can just copy this and you can place it however high you want. Okay, now you can see I have a level 3 and I can maybe lock one of my other walls to level 3. So now if I click on this wall, click on my top constraint, go to level 3, click apply. Now that one is tied to level 3. So I have 3 different layers or 3 different levels, and my walls are tied to the different levels that I have placed. Okay. Now you can also place a new level by, let me find it. By going to your datum section right here. You can see right now that is grayed out, and that's because I'm in a 3D view. What you'd have to do is go into like an elevation or a section view, and this is a little bit beyond what we're getting into right now with just the walls, but let's say I draw a section view, use my section tool right here and draw one, then I double click on that. All right, so now I'm in a section view, And you can see here is just a 2D section of those walls. I'll switch my view style so that you can see a little bit better. But you can see are my levels, and I can create a new level now just by clicking and dragging, and there's my new level. So now I have a level 4, and if I go back to my 3D view, you can see now I have a level 4 right there at 26 feet. All right. So we're going to get into that a little bit deeper later on, how we go about making those views and how we modify levels and stuff using our 2D views like sections and elevations. But I'm going to focus now a little bit more on these walls and just a few more aspects of them, okay? All right, so another thing that we can do with our walls is we can change what's known as the profile of the wall. So changing the profile of the wall lets us insert like custom openings into them. And this is something you can do with like floors and ceilings and stuff too. But what we can do is when we have a wall, we can select it in either a 3D view like we're now, or inside of a section view or an elevation view. So here's a section view. I could do it in the same way. Maybe I do it to this wall right here. You can select it and then go to this section up here that says Edit Profile. Okay. If I click on Edit Profile, that takes me to a sketch mode, and this is very similar to what we had last week. Okay, so when we drew in our floor underneath of our floor plan, or when we drew in that little custom family on the floor plan, that took us to a sketch mode where we have these pink lines, and we basically drew in the shape we wanted, and we clicked OK, and that made the shape. Okay, same thing, but what we can do here is use our drawing tools, and we can make custom, I'll say, cutouts inside of our wall. Okay, so let's say I wanted to make a circular cutout inside this wall right here. I could just click on my circle tool, then I could click and I could drag and make that whatever diameter I wanted. And then when I'm happy with that, I can click the green check mark, and that is going to apply that circle to my wall. So now if I go back to my 3D view and I look at that in 3D, you can see now I have a nice little hole, circular hole that is cutting through the wall. Okay, you can do the same thing in a 3D view as well. So if I were to click on my wall again, click on my Edit Profile, I can now go in here and I could change this. And maybe I want to add like another one. I can make like a little square right here, click OK, and I can see I have a square as well up here. The only thing you don't want to do when you are modifying this in a sketch mode, like I said, you don't want any overlaps. Okay, so if I were to do something like this and click OK, it's going to give me an error because it doesn't know what to do with this section right here. If I wanted to combine two shapes, what I'd have to do is split this and trim out these portions right here. All right, so what I'd have to do is I'd have to pull this. I'd have to zoom in close here, remove that line, make sure that this one is intersecting with my circle, and then drag this up to where it intersects with my circle there. Then I would need to use my split element tool. So this tool right here. This is basically my little X-Acto knife. I want to take a chunk out of this circle so I can click on 2 points. And now if I go back to my modify tool, which is my regular little arrow, you can see when I hover over that section, it's now created a new individual line segment between those 2 points that I cut. Okay, so I can click on that and I can delete it out. And now if I click on my circle, I can click and drag these points back until they touch. And this is going to be a valid shape now because there's no extra geometry within here overlapping. You just want the boundary. Okay, so now if I were to click on the green check mark, you can see it creates that shape inside of the wall correctly how we want it. All right. Then at any time, if you don't like what you did and you want to undo it, you can always click on the wall and go up here to this option that says Reset Profile. And that's going to undo everything you just did and make the profile as you had it. All right. Another thing that we can do with these walls is we can insert standard openings. So let's say I wanted to create an opening between two rooms. All right. So let me pull this wall out a little bit and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and I'm actually going to make it so it's like an actual room. Let me delete these out. And I'm going to hide my levels. Okay, so now we just have our little wall here, or we have our little building. I'm going to copy one of these walls. Okay, so now we have two sections inside of this building, and we have a wall that's dividing them. Okay, so let's say I want to make a custom opening inside this wall. Okay, so one thing I could do to do that is I could edit the profile of this wall. I could click on it, click on Edit Profile, and then I could use my line tool, and I could say maybe I want that to be 7 feet high, I want that to be 6 feet wide, and then finish that. And then I would need to trim out this portion right here, so I would want to split this. So let's split little two sections right there, delete out our middle, and then drag this back, drag that back. And now with our wall profile looking like that, click OK. And there we have a little opening inside of our wall so we can get from one side to the other. All right, so another way to do that is to go up here to our opening section. So my opening section is here on my architecture tab, all the way over here to the right. You can see I have these options here where it says opening. If you hover over these, you can get an idea of what they do. So this one that says by face, this is going to create an opening that's perpendicular to the selected face of a floor, roof, or ceiling. You can see right there the example they're using is like an opening for like a skylight inside of a roof. This one right here is a shaft opening. This is going to create a sort of like if you think of an elevator, you're cutting through multiple floors of a building. So if you see in that little example right there, essentially they're creating an opening that's directly on top of each other on each floor all the way through the building. This one right here is for walls. Okay, and this one essentially is going to do what I want. Okay, so you can use this on curved walls. You can see they're using it on a curved wall, or you can use it on straight walls like we have. And then we have a vertical one and we have a dormer. But if I were to click on the wall, I can hover my wall here and then click and drag. Let me see if I can get that a little bit better. Okay, so all we do is hover over the corner of our wall, the edge of it, click once, and then drag. And there you can see I'm dragging out an opening. And when I release that, when I double click, it completes that wall opening. And I can always go back and select that wall opening element and modify it. Okay, so I could drag these where I want it to be, and I can modify the shape of that opening. So that works really well for just rectangular openings. But again, if you want to do something more custom, like I showed previously with the circles and stuff, you'd want to modify the actual wall's profile. All right. So now I'm going to show you one last thing in this video, and that is the concept of hosting. All right, so what do I mean by hosting? So inside of Revit, all of our objects tie into one another in a way that's called hosting. So walls can host certain types of elements, floors can host certain types of elements, ceilings can host certain types of elements. So you can think of a host as the element or the object that something else is inserted into. So for example, a wall can host doors and windows, okay? And it can host like other types of elements like sconces, like wall sconces. Anything that is built into a wall in real life is hosted in Revit by the wall, okay? And the way that this works is, since you have hosts that are tied to specific objects, okay, so like doors and windows and stuff, you can only place them into the types of objects that can host them, okay? So if I were to click on my door tool, you can see as I hover over my wall, it wants to place it inside of the wall because the wall is a valid host for a door, okay? When I click, you can see that it places the door exactly how I want it. If I were to create a floor, okay, so there's a floor, and I try to put a door into a floor, you can see I get that little error icon. And obviously we can't put a floor into a door. We wouldn't do that in real life. And since that is not a valid host for a door, Revit doesn't let you do it. It only lets you do it once you get over an object that is a valid host for a door. So again, as I hover over my wall, you can see the preview of the door and it wants to make it. All right. Same goes for windows. So windows host onto walls and I can put them there, but they don't host onto the floor. Another thing you can think about with hosting is a ceiling. So a ceiling is a host to light fixtures. Okay, so if I had like a can light or a pendant light, that would be a valid host for a light fixture. All right, if I had a family that was made to go onto a ceiling, that would be a valid host for that family. All right, so I'm going to place a door, and I want to show you sort of like error messages that you're going to get when you don't have a valid host. Okay, so if I were to place a door and a window, let's say I place these, and I'm going to go back to my floor plan. I'm going to move this down in my view so I can see it. Okay, so let's say I place this door and I place this window in my floor plan. Then something changes about the floor plan. I modify this wall. Like, I'm going to pull this wall back to here where the window is no longer within the new portion of the wall. When I release that, you can see I'm getting this little error right here in the bottom. I get this, orange warning in this error, and it's telling me can't cut its instance of 36 inch by 48 inch out of wall. Okay, so it's telling me this window right here, that window size, it's no longer able to cut it out of the wall, and that's because the wall is no longer there where the window is. So I have two options. I can either cancel and undo what I did to that wall, or I can click on delete instance, and that's going to delete out the window. Okay, so I can click delete instance, the window goes away, and the error goes away, and the wall goes where I want it. Same thing with the door, and if you were to pull this back into any portion that overlaps the door, you're going to get sort of a similar error, typically. Let me see here. I guess sometimes it doesn't, but usually you'll get an error if you have some sort of a conflict between where the door is placed into the wall. I guess maybe a better example is if I were to drag this door over here and overlap it with this intersection. I don't know why that's working. Usually that shouldn't work. Let me try it with a window. That works too. Well, usually it doesn't work, okay? So if you place an object into a weird spot like that, typically it will give you an error. Of course, it doesn't want to replicate that right now when I'm trying to demonstrate it, but trust me, it typically happens whenever you place an object into a weird place. Usually it will warn you that there's some kind of a conflict here between these elements, and it's going to give you issues, okay? All right, so just keep that in mind, okay? Even though it's not working right now, keep in mind that that will happen from time to time. Whenever you place something and then you move it, you're going to get some sort of like a hosting error that object can no longer be hosted. So if I were to move it outside of its host, it's going to give me an error, and it's going to say it's not cutting anything, and do I want to delete it or do I want to keep it? So I'm going to delete it, and it goes away. All right. Okay, and one last thing, and this is wall placement and how this works. So I'm going to delete out my walls, and I'm going to show you methods of how we place walls in the locations that we want. Okay, so I'm going to create some new walls, and here I want to start with my first point, so I click and I drag out. Now you can always reference the dimension at the top of the wall for how long your wall is, or if you have a specific dimension in mind for how long it needs to be, you can type that in at this point. So 20 feet, hit enter, and that is going to place the wall where I want it. Okay, now let's place a few more. Let's go to like 60 feet. Drag down here. To pan, I just hold the middle mouse button and I drag. There's 60 feet. Drag this back here to where I'm getting my reference line snapping going on, so I know I'm in the right location. Click there and then drag back up to finish. All right, so now let's say I want to divide this room that I've essentially made into 3 equal parts. All right, actually no, let's do 4 equal parts. So what I can do is I can click here on the midpoint of my wall, click and drag to put a wall right there. And then I'm just going to copy this one down. So I'm going to click that, click on copy. I'm going to copy this down a couple times. Okay. So now you can see we have 4 regions of our wall, or inside of this room here. We have 4 individual rooms, but they are not evenly separated, okay? So they have different volumes. I'm going to add in room labels so that you can see this really clearly. This is something we'll dive into a little bit later, but if I go here to my architecture tab, click on my room option, I can drag inside of each of these and then place rooms inside of each of them. All right. Then once that's done, I can click on this, edit the, I want to click on the actual room here, and I can modify this so that it shows me my square footage. Oh, there. Modify the tag. Go here and click on show volume. Or no, show area. There we go. Now you can see I have square footages here for each of these rooms. All right. So they're all different numbers, obviously. So to fix this and make these all even, what you can do is use dimensions. All right, so I'm going to go here to my annotate tab, and then I'm going to go to my align dimension. Okay, and I'm going to start drawing in some dimensions. So to do this, you want to zoom in pretty closely, and I want to get this outside face right here, or this inside face. So what I want to do is hover over the line right there for the inside face, and I want to click tab a few times until I get it till it highlights. So you can see now I click tab once, it highlights, and I can click, and that's where the first spot on my dimension goes. Next, I want to put a dimension to the midpoint of this wall. Okay, so I'm going to hover over the midpoint of that wall, and then click, and then start dragging out here. But you can see my dimension continues. So next I want to click on the midpoint of the next wall and then keep going, midpoint of this wall. And then go down here to the inside face right here, click on tab until I get that to highlight, and then click. And now what I have to do is drag outside a little bit and click one last time to complete that dimension. All right, so if I click escape a few times to close out of that dimension tool, you can see there are my dimensions, and you can see these are all different numbers. All right, so now that we've done that, a really cool thing that we can do with the dimension tools inside of Revit, since Revit's intelligent, is we can click on our dimension string. Then we can go here to this EQ button, and you can see it says toggle dimension equality. When I do that, it's going to make all of these dimensions here the same. And when it does that, whatever object is tied to those dimensions will move along with them. So if I click on EQ, you can see now all these have moved, and it looks like I did that slightly wrong. So they're pretty close, but they're a little bit different. You can see these two on the ends match and these two here in the middle match. If I were to switch that, so I can select my dimension again and then click on this button right here. This is called the Move Witness Line tool. If I click on that little dot and I drag, so I'm just holding and dragging now. If I drag over here to my wall and I hover over the midpoint of that wall and release, it's going to update the location of the endpoint of that dimension to the middle of that wall now. I can go up here to the top and I can do the same thing. So I can click and hold and drag, hover over the midpoint of this wall here and release, and now it updates that. Now that that's done, I can click on EQ again, and it's going to shift all of these. It gave me an error, but that's okay. I'm just going to click on Remove Constraints, and you can see now all of my areas of my rooms are the same. So I know that these are the exact same sized rooms, okay? So that's something really cool that we can do when we go in here and we move around our walls. Then once you're done getting them in the place that you want, you can click on the dimension, just delete it, click on constrain, that's fine, and you can see now I have what I want. So that's something really powerful inside of Revit is you can get things the exact way you want them by using the dimensions. The dimensions are intelligent inside Revit, and they're actually used for modeling purposes, not just for annotation purposes. All right, something else that we can do with our wall tools. Let's say I want to modify the location of a wall. So I'm going to go back to my architecture tab and create some new walls. All right, here's a new room. And I'm just going to divide this into quarters. All right, let's say I want to modify the location of these walls that are inside of here. What you can do is you can click on a wall, and when you do that, you'll see you get these temporary, these are known as temporary dimensions. So these blue dimensions that pop up here at the bottom, as opposed to a regular dimension that is black. Okay, there's a regular dimension. Here is a temporary dimension. You can see these temporary dimensions are blue. So what these do is you can go down here, these temporary dimensions, and you can click inside of them, and you can type in your dimension spacing that you want, okay? So let's say I want the middle of this wall to be a certain distance, let's say 10 feet from the edge of this wall right here. Well, first what I could do is I could click and drag my witness line again, zoom in really close while I'm holding that, hover over this face, click tab to get it, and release. Okay, so you can see now the location of my temporary dimension here changed. And now I can just type in my dimension of 10 feet, hit enter, and now that is in the correct spot. And that's moved how I want it. Okay, let's do the same thing for this one here. Let's say I want inside of this room, I want a 12-foot distance from the inside of this wall and the inside of this wall. So I can go down here again, click on this dot, hold and drag it until I get over the edge, click tab to make sure that is selected, and then release. Go up here to this one, click and then hold on that dot, drag over top of my face, click on tab, and then release when I have it where I want. And then I just go in here and I click on the text and I type the dimension that I want. So 12 feet, hit enter, and there you go. You can see that that is now correct how you want it. All right. So that is going to do it for this video. Hopefully that all makes sense, and I will see you in the next video.